Hey, we are live. It's showtime.
Yes. Happy Treason Day, Americans.
Woohoo! Just Paulo and I hanging out here tonight. Wilson may
Mm.
stop by. He's at a barbecue. It'll probably go late, I imagine. Barbecues. I don't even know where his is, so
Mm.
we'll see. If Wilson gets back in time, he'll show up.
Well, it's a party in the Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna go. It's gonna go late.
Yeah. It'll go till after dark at least. And
People
they
in the
got
Bronx
street
like to
lights.
party.
They got street lights everywhere.
Mm.
You might hear some loud explosions later over my mic, but we'll have to see. And my one neighbor's been playing loud music all day. It's like, oh well.
Yeah,
Only happens
we
every now and then.
we are in mourning.
Aha.
A famous soccer player uh, died in a car crash yesterday.
I saw a headline about that.
Yeah, and the whole country is in shock. And
Ah.
the funeral was today.
Aha.
We don't wait. We don't wait around a week for funerals. We just do them.
He died in a car crash in
In,
Spain, was it?
yeah, and he was buried in Portugal today.
Ah.
So,
What was speed involved?
well, it was a Lamborghini.
Ah, yes. So yes. a One of the draft choices in the NFL draft this year, a rookie, Shedeur Sanders, like a month ago, it was made news because he got pulled over and ticketed for doing 120. Uh, of course, the speed limit wasn't 120.
Right.
So lots of questions about his judgment on all the talking head sports TV shows happened, but no one was killed. So it was only in the news cycle for a day or two. Mm-hmm.
More than 90% of American cars are electronically limited to 110.
Uh-huh. I could, yeah. I don't even know if you need 110, but you know.
No, this is not. Wait, it's not 110. No, it's 130. Sorry. Yeah, no.
130.
So you can't do 120, but it'll take you a while to get there.
Yeah, my Honda Civic isn't getting that fast.
But in Japan, they're all limited to 110.
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually have a whole bunch of topics for tonight. I don't know, maybe
Right.
because I missed last week.
Mm-hmm.
Last week I wasn't able to be on because my internet went out for a long time. Like usually when my internet goes out, it's down for a couple of hours. They fix it, it's back up.
Mm-hmm.
Last week it was all day Friday into Saturday morning. I was like, ooh, Captain Finity's here. Perfect timing. Got off a live stream myself. Now you can entertain me.
Yeah, time traveler talking about perfect timing.
First thing we're going to entertain you with is I was watching the show last week,
mm-hmm.
and you were talking about 70s Marvels, and you had a little throwaway comment where you said something like, you know, the mainstream Marvel stuff in the 70s wasn't that good, but the weird stuff was pretty good. And then you said something like, except for the Hulk that Jared likes or something like that. That got me thinking. I was like, what Hulk comics do I actually think are good?
Right.
Because I got to say, I haven't read any of those Hulk comics in a lot of years, but it got me stopping and thinking. I pulled out some Hulk comics, and it was an interesting bit. I'll show them to you just because I pulled them out here. We'll start with Hulk 200.
Right.
This is what I consider the start of my comic collection. You can tell by how beat up this comic is. This is still my original issue. So this is what I consider the start of my comic collection. But is it a good comic? I wouldn't say it's good. It's okay. Even as a kid, if you've never read Hulk 200, it's got all these villains on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And even as a kid, I knew that it was a cheat because he's not really facing all these villains. The plot is someone has to go into Bruce Banner's mind, and or the Hulk's. Someone has to go into someone's mind. I forget who it was, but all these villains are in the Hulk's mind. So the Hulk is only facing them. He punches them once and they disappear because they're phantoms. They're not real. You know, it's one of those anniversary issues where you want to get as many characters in as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trying to save Bruce Banner, I think it was. And even though, like I said, I consider this the start of my collecting comics, I still don't think it's not a particularly good issue of the Hulk. And also, my Hulk is the Sal Buscema Hulk. Because that's who drew, and I think a lot of it was good too because he had good inkers. There was a lot of Ernie Chan on Sal Buscema during this era, and the reason I consider it the start of my collection is because I had Hulk 200, and my friend and neighbor who lived next door had Hulk 201, 202, and 203.
Right.
And that was the first time I realized they all had numbers and they all went in a row and made one big story. So I traded him like 40 comics for these 3 comics. I don't even remember what 40 comics. I don't remember what comics I had. I know I read comics, but I wasn't really a collector until I realized these all went in a row and you could collect them. And I was like, ooh, that's cool. So of these 3 issues, these are pretty fun. And one of the things, but also in going back, I realize the number of Hulk comics that I genuinely think are good, even back then, only lasted for 2 or 3 years at best. And it was still my favorite kind of hero, but like anything above Hulk 230 is iffy at best. So it's like and the reason I realized the reason I like a lot of Hulk comics from this era too, even if they're not great, they're very imaginative. Because in this, Hulk's like, I can't remember if he's traveling through time or the microverse, but in this one, Hulk goes to this barbarian world with this Conan clone. So there was a lot of imagination in this era of the Hulk. Even if the comics weren't great, there was a lot of imagination. So we go from there to, he goes back to Jarella's world. Of course, I had no idea who Jarella was because I never had any of those issues. But I could tell, but you got from the story that he's going. So this is, once again, it was fun. He's going back to this weird barbarian world, and then like the Psylocke. So at this point, Hulk is almost a fantasy comic because he's not doing superhero things. He's in this real, and then what's in, like I said, when I'm a lot of my at this time, like I said, I'm 9-10 years old. And even then, like I can like that, even at like 9, that Hulk 200 wasn't a great comic, but it was okay. It was fun, some imagination in it. And then I immediately went back and got, like I said, from the around the neighborhood, wherever that kids network was in the neighborhood, I immediately went and got like the 190s. So I had these. They were among my first Hulk. And probably around that first year, I got these, which was Hulk 189 was the first, back issue of the Hulk I got. Only a year old, so it wasn't really that much of a back issue. I could find these around the neighborhood when kids were selling their comics, for a nickel a comic or something. So here he is taking on the Mole Man.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one he's taken on Glorian, the Rainbow Rider.
Is that Glorian's first appearance?
I think he may have shown up a few issues earlier. I think this might be the second Glorian story, but it's still the same era, kind of. It's like I don't think he was gone for long. But
And
this is weird.
He was a little kid that had been given powers, right?
I can't even remember. Oh, here he is with the Toad Men. I think he was on another planet or something. It was like this era of the Hulk was real, like very imaginative, though. Like Mole Man and then Glorian. I mean, this isn't your 19th appearance of Doc Ock sort of stuff. Your 20th appearance of Doc Doom. It wasn't great, but it was imaginative. Here he takes on the Shaper of Worlds.
Right. He's the one who gave Glorian his power.
Right. Who once again it's mind stuff. So, and then here 190. I think this is about when Sal Buscema takes over. 192, and I think this is like a Loch Ness, the lurker beneath the Loch Fear. This is like a Loch Ness monster story of something.
Right.
I really haven't read these in so long, but I read them a lot back then. Well, and like I said, these are good call. And then I always liked, and Doc Samson. This was my first introduction to Doc. Beautiful, a lot of good covers in these 190s too.
And I think Simpson's already permanently green-haired at that time.
Yeah, right. It was like this is my introduction to Doc Samson. He was cool because he's a character who's like a psychologist.
Yeah.
With green hair and muscles, who wasn't quite as strong as the Hulk, but he tried to stand up to him. So this was like these 190s were. And here's just bizarre, imaginative. He takes on Locust.
Yeah, that's a villain from the early issues of the X-Men.
Once again, all he does is make bugs into giant monsters.
Yeah,
perfect for the Hulk. Very like there was a lot of they weren't just recycling every villain you've ever heard of. In this era, there was a lot of imagination to it, even if the comics weren't the greatest. Then, of course, the Abomination shows up.
Again. Now it's the umpteenth appearance.
But I didn't know the Abomination yet.
Right. Yeah, I guess.
But I could tell he was an old, you could tell he was an old character. But he's kind of cool because he's just like the Hulk. Abomination, second part of the Abomination, where the Hulk teams up with. So that was kind of cool. First he fights the Abomination, then he kind of teams up with him. And then we get this great Bernie Wrightson Man-Thing cover.
Yeah.
I think this might be the only Bernie Wrightson Hulk cover. So I would say this particular era had some nice covers on it. And of course, we continue with the Man-Thing story.
Mm-hmm.
So Hulk and Man-Thing was a pretty good, there was, I thought there was a lot as a kid, and even then, of course, Doc Samson is back with the cables. So first I got these issues. This is where I, got where I first started collecting. Then I went back and got these, and I was like, well, I think then I was kind of hooked on the Hulk, but it was also very, my liking of the Hulk was also very backwards looking, because the other two things I got at around the same, these both came out these are from 70, Hulk 200 is from 76. Which put these other ones at 75. But in 78, so a couple of years later, I got this one, of course, which is the Hulk one. Look at how brown that is. This thing is this thing is so brittle.
That's perfect.
Which actually led me to get this last year. Of course, one of these epic, because I realized this is Hulk 1 through 6, the original 6.
Yeah.
And it's got those are in because I realized I didn't have the original reprints of 1 through 6 except in this. So like, you know what? I want to get those, and so I have them in here now too. Which also has like his earliest crossovers too.
Mhm.
So I had this so I could read the Hulk first 6, and then I had this, which is one of the Fireside books, which reprints most of the what was it, Tales to Astonish he was in with Submariner.
Yeah.
So this reprints all the Tales to Astonish stuff. Banished to Outer Space. I don't
Yeah.
think it has any of 1 through 6. So this is but what was cool about these two that I liked too is you could see the Hulk develop in that you've read all the early Hulks, right? Have you read
Not the.
1 through 6?
I've read 1, 2, 3, and 6.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read any of the Tales to Astonish for some reason.
Well, what was interesting about it is there were so many fits and stops. There was like the Hulk wasn't one of these characters. Hello there, Mind the Comics. How are you doing tonight? Like they kept revamping the Hulk.
Mhm.
I mean, he's famous now from all the different Hulks from those early years. They kept changing like if you go back and read Hulk 1 to 6, it's like there's a different concept every 2 issues. At one point, Rick Jones was controlling him by, all of a sudden the Hulk, whatever Rick Jones did, the Hulk mimicked.
Yeah.
There was times the Hulk was smart. There was times the Hulk was dumb. They kept, and I think was it issue 6? Steve Ditko took over the Hulk. And he looked completely different. Like the Steve Ditko Hulk was different than the Jack Kirby Hulk.
Yep.
And then I think the Steve Ditko Hulk, he did even more in Tales to Astonish was like Jack Kirby was back. Then Steve Ditko did some more Hulk. So there was really, I don't think the Hulk was settled as a character until like he got his own comic. Until even maybe Herb Trimpe.
I'd say so, yeah. I think Maurice Severin settled the look.
Yeah.
But regarding personality, that might be right around the time that becomes the Incredible Hulk instead of the flip book, and because you can see he retains the intelligence throughout all of those issues, but he's beginning to refer to himself in the third person.
Yeah,
that's gradual.
He doesn't become childlike for a while.
Yeah, but he starts getting stronger as he gets madder, writing the Tales to Astonish.
And then there was also, along with, like I said, Hulk could be being that they produced these in '78 within a couple of years of me being a collector. It was interesting to me, the Hulk too, like you said. And then you had even another choice. This is the first issue of this I got. This is Hulk magazine.
Yeah.
And this is what issue is this? 16. So by the time this rolled around, you can see all the tape I have on it, because this was like the first one I ever. Let me see, what year was this?
16 might have been 1979.
You're right on, 79. And it had a lot of interesting stuff in it. There's a Steve Bissette Hulk.
Nice.
Pretty cool. This is full color. Mike Zeck and John Tartaglia. Oh. So this is when the Hulk. Oops. But this one is more like the TV show. They started at like I think it started out as the Rampaging Hulk, as a black and white magazine, and they made it sort of like year one Hulk.
Mhm.
But then when the TV show came around, they changed the color at some point and made it more like the TV show Hulk. So here was another. You didn't get this with characters in those days. Like if you were the Fantastic Four were pretty much the Fantastic Four from the 60s all the way through, 76 when I was first. Spider-Man was pretty much Spider-Man almost all the
Mhm.
way through.
Yeah.
You can say that about almost all the Marvel characters, and certainly the DC ones because they've been around a lot longer. But with the Hulk, he had so many iterations and so many starts and stops and so many let's try this, let's try that. And I have to show you this one too. After the like I said, I was a Sal Buscema Hulk guy.
Yeah.
But these two issues, I started with 200, traded for 202, 203, 204, got those back issues too. But then Hulk 205 and 206 were Herb Trimpe drawn issues. So these were the ones that made me go, what's going on here? Why does the Hulk look so different?
Yeah.
Why does the Hulk not look like the Hulk? And that's when I realized there are people make these.
Right.
And that sort of unlocked everything for me. Once I realized that people make these, when I went back and read these ones, I could see the people like trying things out. And I found that interesting watching people creating comics and trying to, because nothing was set in stone in these early ones like it was with other comics. So it was interesting. It was interesting to me, and this one, of course, the villain is the Crypto Man. Who? The villain is Kronos, Master of Time. Who?
Yeah. A bunch
So
of one-shot villains.
I was getting all, but they're imaginative. Like I was enjoying the imagination of it as a kid, seeing these, you could see them that they're creating stuff. It's not just telling you the same old story. They're creating new stuff. So even though, like I said, trying to think of which comics I think are good, which Hulk comics I think are good, I wouldn't recommend these to anyone. Like they're not, they're good, but you don't have to go out and read them. They're good if they were coming out when you were buying them. They gave me such an insight into making comics.
Mhm.
That's one of the things I liked about them. And I think that's just me. That's just the time and place, and that's just the way the Hulk was. Because nobody's going to say this was an era of good comics for the
Right.
Hulk, but they were interesting in a way.
Yeah. And one thing that I've noticed is that I started reading already with Bill Mantlo writing, so I hadn't even read the Roger Stern issues, and I'm a big fan of Roger Stern, and I'm familiar with his Hulk output, which is probably his first big job
Right.
at Marvel,
Yeah.
even before the Captain America run with John Byrne, and even starting with the final Len Wein, well, maybe not the final because you have that even in the 170s. But there are a lot of one-shot villains or normal people causing trouble, and there's that exploration of the human psyche, because some people are really evil, even if they look meek. Some are just misunderstood, or they're too focused on one thing, like when the Hulk rides in the space galley with Klaatu, or or that run of issues where the Hulk is captured by a sort of Captain Nemo like character, and then and then everyone lives under the sea, and by the end of that story, Banner convinces them that they should be free, so they all come to the surface, and then they all blow up because they can't handle the pressures. And and I always thought that was very tragic. That exploration of the human psyche. Those people didn't know they were yearning for freedom, and when they finally get it, they die. There's the guy who was in love with the man with the sister of the man who became the first Wendigo. In that story where Wolverine first shows up, and then he has to become Wendigo. In order to sacrifice himself. There's Klaatu with his Captain Hayab obsession with killing that energy monster, or like that woman who lives alone in an island and turns everybody into glass. That's like the first Hulk story I read.
Damien Dyer here saying the days when we didn't pay attention to credits. No, these are the days when I first started paying attention to credits.
Yeah.
I was about 10, and it was Herb Trimpe who made me pay attention to credits because I was used to the Sal Buscema Hulk. And the Herb Trimpe Hulk was in 204 and 205. I was like, what? So that's when I first started paying attention to credits. Mm-hmm. But then we're around...
I kind of noticed not with writers or pencilers, but with inkers. I've told this story here before. Mm-hmm. So it's fantastic. John Burns drawing the X-Men with inked by Terry Austin, and it's full of blacks everywhere. And then he inks himself on the Fantastic Four, and it's not the same thing. Or like there's an issue of the X-Men where Joe Rubinstein was being a guest inker.
Yeah.
And then the next issue, Bob Wyacek comes back, and then I notice,
that doesn't look the same.
It's Dave Cockrum drawing the same, but it's not the same. It doesn't look the same because the inker does affect how the art looks.
Evening 62 Lefty Blues. Let's see, Mind the Comic says, Little me enjoyed Childlike Hulk. Yeah, so did I. It's an era which the message was pretty much the same, but delivered differently in Silver Surfer, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Luke. Yeah. They had a very heroic message in those days. And I liked the Just Leave Me Alone Hulk was always fun. But then I like this cover, but I remember nothing about the issue all these years later. I think this was just like a Hulk against the world issue.
Yeah, and that cover's famous because it's been licensed for binders and posters.
Right. And then, of course, we have the next two issues. Just the next issue, 207. This is the Defenders. So this introduced me to the Defenders, and then I got some more Hulk because the Hulk was in the Defenders, of course. I was like, oh, so I started looking for. So it was like that was a completely other view of the Hulk, is when he's with the Defenders, and this was really weird because he was fighting his friends.
Right.
So that was a weird twist going on to me. Like I said, there was even if this era wasn't full of great comics, it was full of imaginative ones. Like I said, I wouldn't say anybody has to go back and read these because they're classics. They're not. But this is why the Hulk was a favorite as a kid, was because it gave me so much insight into the making of comics with the, going back and reading the original Hulks, going back and reading the Tales to Astonish stuff. There were so many different versions of the Hulk that it gave me insight into how you make a character kind of thing. And then there was issues like this where a bunch of guys just made a super tank and ended up fighting the Hulk. So it's like, what? I think they were just trying to rob a bank too. dramatic turning point. I can't even remember much about this, except I think they were trying to rob a bank with their super tank, and the Hulk smashed them all up. But you just feel sorry for these two guys shooting the Hulk with their blasters as he rips a turret off their tank. It's like, what the? They can't do anything against him.
Yeah, but they have to. I mean, they wasted all of their savings building their tank, and now some guy shows up and starts wrecking it.
Mm-hmm.
They ought to sue.
Then, of course, it was always good when the Hulk just fought other giant monster guys like the Absorbing Man.
Yeah.
Absorbing Man was always a fun villain. I don't remember how he was defeated in this one, but he seemed to always be defeated by he accidentally touched a piece of glass and someone shattered him.
Yeah.
That seemed to be the way to defeat Absorbing Man. But Absorbing Man was, it was always fun when Hulk takes on the big, powerful guys. Then was weird stuff we get on 2 issues with the Hulk taking on Dr. Druid and the Maha Yogi. Once again, not the greatest comics. And then of course, they force him to fight a giant brute. Mongu. Mm-hmm. Once again, none of this was great, but it was all very imaginative. And it was not superhero stuff. It was kind of, adventure stuff. So it was unlike the other Marvels. So now being that we're at 211, we're a good solid year into me buying the Hulk regularly. Plus the back issues was another year. So maybe so far we're in a good solid 2 years of me liking Hulk issues. But I think things get spotty from now on. Let me see if I get. Let's give these a look. I like this. Once again, this is the first appearance of the Constrictor. I did not think he was a particularly good villain for the Hulk. Mm. But at least it was something.
But he was perfect in Captain America.
Yeah. It was something, fun. At least they're trying. Once again, they're coming up with a new villain. And then, of course, I love this cover. You just don't quarrel with the Quintronic Man. Introducing the 5-in-1 threat. Once again, another giant robot with 5 people controlling it. The Quintronic Man, great name. Is it not great, but imaginative? Let's make a giant robot and try and take on the Hulk. That never works out. Once again, a good cover. Good stuff. And here's one of my favorite issues, the Jack of Hearts. Mm-hmm. I liked the Jack of Hearts. He was one of my favorites during this era. He only appeared in like 4 comics, I think. But the reason I liked the Jack of Hearts and why he was good in Hulk is he was kind of young and out of control.
Yeah.
His powers were blasts. He had to wear that containment suit just so he didn't explode. And there was no subtlety to his powers. I really this was one of my favorite issues as a kid because I liked the way he looked. I liked his powers. I liked the fact that he was young and out of control. Matter of fact, he became boring once his powers became once he, like I said, he only appeared in a handful of issues over a decade or something. So it's not like he was a big character, but he was one of my favorites.
He was part of Iron Man's regular cast for about a year and a half, I think.
Must have been after I stopped reading Iron Man.
So that was about 1980.
1980? I was still reading them then. I can't remember them though.
Because it was in Bill Mantlow's run before Michelini and Layton started. Yeah.
I can't remember. Maybe evening. Say good evening to Comic Crack.
Hey.
We're going over what issues of the Hulk from my youth when he was my favorite, and if they're actually any good. Like this was one of my favorite issues, as I said. And then, like I said, I remember nothing about this one except when the Hulk took on Shield. It was boring.
Yeah, but that was during the first Hulk Buster base,
Yeah,
and some Shield guy or tried to take no, that was Alan Quartermain. He was the Shield guy,
yeah.
but another guy showed up from the Air Force, Colonel Armbruster.
Who is Valadar? This cover
Valadar?
by Valadar and Chan.
Oh,
VAL.
I think that's Jim Starlin.
Oh. Huh. Let's see this. Yeah.
Does it look like Jim Starlin?
It's tough to tell with the Ernie Chan inks.
Yeah. I guess it could be. Yeah, Ernie Chan drowns out the other people's style.
Yeah. But
I think
then
I think it's Valadar. Let me check the Grand Comics database
check it
because
out.
I'm
Does it
pretty
have anything
sure
to do with the inside or just the cover? Let me open it up just to see.
Valadar. Oh, it's Rich Buckler.
Oh, it's Buckler.
Yeah.
Buscema and Ernie Chan. Yeah, Buscema and Ernie Chan were a good team in this era. That's another reason I liked the Hulk. But I remember I don't remember much about this. But then here's more imagination. The Bi Beast.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the Bi Beast because I found him, another giant big guy but he had like two heads in one, so he talked to himself. That was kind of fun. This big giant monster who talked to himself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Jim Starlin had a different name, Gemini.
Gemini. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Also
this is
Steve Apollo.
here's Starlin. I recognize this. It's unsigned, but that's Starlin.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Was it Circus of Crime? I always found the Circus of Crime fun, but I didn't really need them taking on the Hulk. So this is where it starts.
They debuted in the Hulk in those 1 to 6 issues.
They did, and I, as much as I thought they were cool, I didn't like them as Hulk villains particularly.
But the Ringmaster is a Jack Kirby design from the 1940s. He
So
appeared in Captain America.
Once we get into the teens, I get a little iffy with liking the Hulk and not. Let's see what else we got here.
But I do like seeing Jim Starlin take on more mundane characters because we get so used to seeing him do cosmic.
Doc Samson and the Rhino. We're back to me liking it because I like Doc Samson and I like the Rhino.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even know if
that's a weird face for the Hulk.
It's supposed to be ghosted too, so there's like marks over. See, it's supposed to be, if the Hulk couldn't beat the Rhino, what chance do I stand? So it's got like ghosted version, but instead of ghosting it like you would like turning down the opacity today, he just chipped away at the line, so the line isn't solid. Like if you look at his fist there, the line isn't solid.
Right.
So his face isn't solid either. So it's like he's missing teeth and things.
That's issue number what?
218. That's an Ernie Chan cover by himself.
Ernie Chan. Okay.
So that was probably an issue I liked. And then we get to more Ernie Chan. I think it's like Hulk versus Pirates.
Ah.
I think there was a huge fan of. I mean, here's the second part of it's. What is it?
Yeah, the villain in that is called Captain Barracuda.
Yeah, there's Hulk versus Pirates. I can do without.
Yeah, there is Captain Barracuda.
So here, there's a couple of issues that were duds, and then we get one of my favorites, Stingray.
Yeah.
Who I always just kind of liked because he's got such a cool costume, probably. No, don't hurt him, Stingray. Don't hurt him, Green Skin. Stingray is the only one who can help you. I liked him because he was a scientist and not really a superhero. I liked him because he had a super cool costume. So this was probably an issue I liked. After a couple, I didn't. Like now, I think we're in the 220s. And we're getting up to sort of I remember nothing about once again. Once we're into the generic covers,
Yeah,
possibly.
that one has Starlin art inside.
Let's see. This might be around the TV show year. Oh yeah, Jim Starlin, Len Wein, plots Starlin and Alfredo. Oh, I probably liked the art on this one. Oh yeah, if it's Starlin art, I liked it, but it was like a fill-in issue, and like I said, I was savvy enough to realize, even though I liked the Starlin art, to know it was a fill-in issue and it had nothing to do with the regular series, kind of thing. So I was probably a little disappointed in it, even though I liked the Starlin art. And here's another generic cover. I remember nothing about this.
Right, that's the first. That's the first Roger Stern.
Okay. 223. Nice cover, but generic.
Which is kind of funny because he fights the leader.
Next issue, 220. Really nice cover on this one with against the leader.
Okay.
So I probably liked that one.
Yeah. Yeah, because he fights the leader on both of those, but they only show him on the cover on the second one, which is kind of what Marvel used to do. If there was a 2-part story, they have a generic cover or some MacGuffin fight on the cover to the first part, so that it's a surprise when the Hulk finally meets the real villain, and in the next month they'll put him on the cover.
This is Sal Buscema and Joe Rubinstein. And Hulk and Bruce Banner's on a picnic most of the issue. Let's see, there's a leader. Oh, yeah, the leader. The reason he's not on the cover is because he didn't show up until the last page. That's why he's not on the cover. It really was Bruce Banner having a picnic most of the time, like the cover shows us. So I think the 220s is where I'm losing some enthusiasm for the Hulk. I would still say he was my favorite. I probably bought the Hulk up until like the 280s. But I was like, but at that point I was buying it just out of habit. Like, here's the leader issue. And then after that, I think there's the third part to the leader. Not a great cover, but it's okay. Oh, and then I remember this issue because it introduced me to Socrates.
Yeah.
That's the Hulk smashing a statue of Socrates. and the Hulk was having some existential crisis. And I think he ended up finding a statue of Socrates that said, "Know thyself," and he turned into Bruce Banner or something. Let me see if I can find that. I haven't looked at it. So, oh, there he is. There's the Socrates, "Know thyself," the Hulk. I always liked this moment. The Hulk gets pissed off and smashes the statue, but then hugs the head and turns into Bruce Banner. And that was probably also symbolic of me not liking the Hulk, not liking the Hulk as much. The comic wasn't as good as the previous couple of years that I liked it. Because now let me see, were you watching the Hulk TV series in this era? I think I was on and off. Because you got to remember, in those days, if you didn't see it live, you didn't see it. And I think there may have been something up against it that I liked better. Even though I was a huge Hulk fan, the TV show wasn't the Hulk. It was its own thing. The Big Monster on Campus seems more like a 60s title than a 70s one. Yeah. And here, and maybe we get this weird contemplative Hulk because of the TV show. But now we're up to 227. Once Marvel's TV sensation was on it, I think I stopped liking the Hulk as much. I don't remember this one at all. What are the old Avengers doing? From the dim past, is this another film? Or is this a flashback? Let's see. I don't remember. Nope, it's what's his name? Doc Samson has got the Hulk on the psychiatrist couch.
Mhm.
So I guess it's the Hulk reliving. You know, we're a long way from the imagination and adventure of the 190s and the 200s when we got the Hulk on the couch. What was it? This is the last Hulk story I remember liking. Murder is a maid called Moonstone.
First appearance.
First
So
appearance.
you gotta get that slab. That thing probably sells for $300.
Whoa, mine's not in great shape. So it was a two, and the one thing I remember liking about it was the Moonstone didn't want to fight the Hulk. She was like there for some other purpose to steal things or something. And she spent her
Yeah,
time like running
there
away from
was.
the Hulk.
Yeah, there's a plot crossover because Moonstone is involved with something called the Corporation,
Oh yeah.
and which was also part of of Captain America.
Mm-hmm.
Right around the time that they killed Sharon Carter, and the Corporation, they have their leader is Senator Stivak, and he appears in the Hulk and Captain America, and he's got a thing about superheroes, but he's actually crooked.
Like this is the last story I remember liking. After this, I still bought it for the next, I don't know, 3 years. But I don't really remember any of them. And here's the 230, the last issue I brought out here. Is the Hulk versus some farmers?
Oh, we're farmers.
It's like, what? Harvest of Fear. Well, Hulk's I mean, look at that. He's scaring a bunch of farmers. Marvel's TV. So I think when the Marvel's TV sensation era started, I stopped liking the Hulk as much. Like I said, I still bought it out of habit, but it is a long way. It is a long way from this era where it was full of adventure and characters. So in thinking back on it,
It was around that time that they ditched Roger Stern, ditched Jim Olsen,
okay,
and introduced Fred Sloan, some hippie dropout from California. And he was, and that guy Sloan was friends with Egghead's niece, who was brought back because she used to appear in the 70s Ant-Man run.
So like I said, you saying that made me think about what issues of the Hulk I think are really good, and there's not that many of them. Mm-hmm. He was my favorite character from my childhood, but one of the reasons I think he was a favorite character is because the era when I started had a lot of imagination in it, even if they're not the greatest stories in history. There was a lot of imagination. There was good art. Sal Buscema inked by a lot of good people, especially Ernie Chan. A lot of good covers in that era too. That the exact era I started, 1978, brought us these two books where I could go, because usually in 1978 you didn't get collected editions of stuff. You couldn't go back to the 60s and look at stuff. It just wasn't possible unless you lived in a big city somewhere that had back issues. So just the fact that like the Hulk also introduced me to the concept of making comics in terms of they were constantly remaking the Hulk to try to get him to work. So there was lots of choices for the Hulk. There was a lot, and then the Herb Trimpe Hulk was a completely different beast. To me, the Herb Trimpe Hulk was like the old-fashioned Hulk. I wasn't a huge fan of the Herb Trimpe Hulk, but I liked it and thought it had a lot of good covers. So I would always get, when I would get like older issues of the Hulk, they'd be the Herb Trimpe Hulk, which to me was a completely different thing, which was not the same with other comics. Like I first started collecting the Avengers during the first George Perez run. But if you went back and got older Avengers, the John Buscema Avengers were still the Avengers. Any era, the Don Heck Avengers were still the Avengers.
Right.
But to me, the Herb Trimpe Hulk and the Sal Buscema Hulk were two completely different things. Captain Finity has never read or owned a single issue of the Hulk.
You need to change that.
Yeah. My very first Hulk was Rocket Raccoon issue. I managed to get some older issues after that. That one was so I had the Rocket Raccoon one, but years ago I got rid of all of my Hulks after issue, I think 250. So I got rid of my Rocket Raccoon one decades before it was worth anything.
That's in the Milmento run, and it's the run that we got over here.
Yeah. I read that. That stuff was okay. I liked the UFOs in particular.
Yeah,
that was like one of the first times I tried to think of something new.
Yeah, I liked the Rangers because we had new superheroes. I had no idea that. Actually, yeah, that's the first appearance of every one of them except the Phantom Rider.
It amazed me thinking about what issues of the Hulk I really thought were good. It was really only a 2 or 3 year period that I thought the Hulk was good when I was really young. And even now, if Captain Finity has never read an issue of the Hulk, if I were to recommend an issue of the Hulk to him, it would be all stuff later than this. I would recommend, let's see, Future Imperfect is a fun Hulk story. The Bruce Jones, J.R. Jr. Hulk, I'd recommend that. I don't like the Peter David Hulk, but enough people like it that I'd recommend some of the Peter David Hulk stories, but I'd let someone else pick the stories because I don't know that much.
I would say start with the storyline that leads into the merged Hulk. Because that's when Dale Keown becomes a regular penciler. And having a Hulk with the mind of Bruce Banner, who is all of a sudden perfectly comfortable being the Hulk, which at the time was refreshing. Because even in Mantlow's run, when he becomes smart, is still always thinking that he's going to lose control at any time, which he eventually does, and then he goes to the crossroads, which like those Hulks that you read, he goes to other worlds and he has adventures, and then he goes back to the crossroads because he has a mental block that if he doesn't like where he ends up, he comes back to the crossroads. And I'm still pissed off because I was a really big fan of the Puffball Collective. Those spores that hung around the Hulk, talking to him. They couldn't go through the portals with the Hulk. They were stuck, and that's explained finally when they finally betrayed the Hulk, because they pretended to be his friends and they acted very friendly. They just couldn't leave, and we always, why can't they leave? Because they're evil.
I see. Eric P says the recent Immortal Hulk I thought was really good. Yeah, I've read a few issues of that. A lot of people recommend that. I'd recommend Planet Hulk. Planet Hulk was. I even liked Scar, Son of Hulk, which was like a Planet Hulk offshoot. I thought that was pretty good too. But these, like I said, I think I found the Hulk at the perfect time for me. it was very imaginative at that time. It offered a lot of variety to me, which is kind of what I like. A lot of variety in characters, a lot of creativity. It allowed me to discover that human beings made comics, and human beings sometimes took many, many steps to make a character. Didn't just come out fully realized. They had to start and stop a few times. Um, but good. How many issues do I think are good? Oof. Out of those, what do I have? From 190 to 230. That's what, 40 issues?
Yeah.
25 of them I'd say are good, and maybe not all in a row.
Yeah.
So it's tough. It's tough saying.
That's what makes a good run, isn't it? If it's consistently good enough, I don't think you can complain if a run is consistently good enough.
Yeah. I don't even know if I'd consider it a run, because there were so many creative changes.
Right.
Sal Buscema might be the only one who was there for almost all of it, at least. There was an issue of Jim Starlin. There was 2 issues of Herb Trimpe. It was tough. It's tough to even think of that as a run.
Right, because you have Len Wein, you have Roger Stern, and then you have Bill Mantlo.
Right.
And in between, you have the odd writer coming up with a fill-in issue, including Peter Gillis.
Yeah.
The most underrated writer in superhero comics.
I thought I'd break out those issues of the Hulk to talk to you about them, because, like I said, that one comment you made last week got me thinking about it. Going, I don't know what issues of the Hulk I think are good. If someone were to start on the Hulk, I'd probably recommend issues from after I, was collecting it regularly.
Well, you had bought a Greg Rucka comic last week.
Yes,
and and because of that, I took out all of my trade paperbacks of Queen and Country.
Queen and Country, right? The one time I had Queen and Country, I bought Queen and Country, was when Carla Speed McNeil was drawing it. I think I may have read an issue or 2 before that, but I bought some because she did a 4-issue arc or whatever it was.
Yeah, the arcs usually had different artists.
Right. So I bought her arc. I think I may have bought one other artist's arc. I can't remember who they are. But you know what's funny about what he's referring to in the format that Jared's back to, because he likes, because it's more expensive. As it's back to be. First, it was a comic. I was buying it, regular monthly or whatever comic. I was buying it then. Then it switched over to these quarterly square bound, like the Dark Knight format, which I'm not a particular fan of. And he had been putting out these source books as their own comics, and they made the quarterly comic half source book and half comic. And like I said, I'm not a big fan of those square bound ones, because they don't open up flat enough, kind of like the trade paperbacks are bad enough eating up a spine. But so I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy the trade. I was like, I don't have to buy the monthly comics to those. I'll buy the trade paperbacks. So trade paperbacks 6 and 7 I bought instead of the monthly comics. And it was funny in reading that. I think the last Lazarus trade paperback came out in 2022 or 23. I forget which, but either way, it's been 2 years, I think, at least. And I thought I missed one, because I'm reading the first issue going, is this where I left off? Something seems to have happened that I don't remember. And I went and looked it up. Nope, sure enough, I had bought the last trade and read it. I just didn't remember. But it was a good Lazarus Reborn, I think is the name of it. But I'm back to that.
Yeah, I don't have any Lazarus, but I did get. So I wasn't going to get the Queen and Countries again, but I did
take something out of the bookshelf.
Greg Rucka, Batman, No Man's Land. Is that one
Yeah,
of those? Is that a novel? Oh, a
yeah, it's a
novel.
novelization.
Oh, wow. Did you actually read it?
Yeah, I read it on
Oh,
the
okay.
plane.
Okay.
How many
How
pages?
was it?
It's actually pretty good like this, because you have a bunch of different writers on the different Batman titles, and having the same guy do the entire voice for a multi-title crossover makes it seems turns it into a solid read. Also, since it has narration, you get the different glimpse into the minds of the characters, which is usually done with the art, but here it needs to be turned into writing.
I can remember in the late 70s, Marvel did a few novelizations.
Yeah, I bought a couple as well. Yeah,
I
thing is
remember, I remember
460
liking the
pages.
Iron Man one.
Yeah,
How many pages?
460.
I remember liking the Iron Man versus MODOK novelization. That one was good. I read a couple of the others and they were bland, but that one was good. Let me show you a couple of comics I got this week. We'll show you a couple of where are they? Scott Koblish Retrovision covers. Let me go solo here. Here is X-Men 19 Retrovision. I think he's doing sort of a Neil Adams mixed with a little Steranko thing on this one.
Yeah, and an X-Men Grand Design style cover as well.
Ah, okay. Because that Cyclops is definitely Neil Adams.
Yeah.
And then we've got all new Venom number 8, Valorous Venom. And this one is actually reminding me of Ditko mixed with Eric Larson. So I've been collecting, I'm Scott's a friend of mine from my Marvel days. So I've been picking up his covers along with Chris Girusso. So, and the comics themselves, let's see, what do we got here? This one was solid. Who does this? The writer is Al Ewing. The artist is Carlos Gomez. Color artist Frank Darmada. Letterer VC's Clayton Cowles. And it's Dr. Octopus versus Venom, I guess. And I think Venom is now who? Mary Jane, was it?
Yeah.
It's Mary Jane. It was a mystery for a little while. So we've got, and Venom has Rick Jones captive. Because Rick Jones used to be a Venom. So now Dr. Octopus, there he is. Rick Jones is upside down and in bondage. Dr. Octopus wants to dissect Rick Jones. He wants to dissect his brain to learn more about the human symbiote connection. Meanwhile, he wants to dissect Venom too. And who are these? These are the Guardians. They're in those those green Iron Man suits. You remember them? I guess they're like Iron Man tech you can buy now. The Guardsmen, that's it. The Guardsmen, not the Guardians. So there's a bunch of them working. I think they're trying to protect the building Doc Ock is in or something. They're like security guards. And Mary Jane turned the Venom outfit into a submarine to escape. So she's using the Venom shape-shifting ability in a whole new way. And so is Doc Ock. His arms are all now like drones. So he split them off to explode or something to defeat Venom. A solid superhero story. It was okay. Yeah. The Hulk also worked well in the Avengers and other titles, playing the role of innocent menace. Mind the comment. Yeah, that's how we worked. We worked that way in the Defender. That was another choice at the time when I was in like '76. Was the Hulk and the Defender. So there was a lot of choices for the Hulk. And let's say the other. This one was pretty well done, but I didn't care. Who's the team on this one? And I think I know what the problem is. Writer is Jed McKay, penciler is Nitho Diaz, inker Sean Parsons, colorist Furs Fuentes Sujo, and the letterer is Clayton Cowles. It was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. But I think I have a problem with the X stuff because, and this one was only 3 characters. Revelation, Doug Ramsey, By the Blood Moon, and Warlock. And he's the guy who, I of course remember Warlock. I've never read By the Blood Moon before. And Doug Ramsey is the guy who could talk to computers.
Yeah.
I don't remember what his mutant name was. I only saw him, read a couple stories with him. But
Cypher.
But since then, he has power creep. He can now, like he used to be able to hack computers, he can now hack the human mind. So he's got sort of Professor X-ish powers, except they're explained differently.
His actual power, he could talk to computers, but he could learn French in 5 minutes.
Right.
That was his other power.
Well, now he can hack the human mind. Eric P says, so basically that was a New Mutants issue? Yeah, I would say so. But this was... the problem I have with this is, I've said this before, it was kind of a realization about mine all of a sudden the name of the comic flew right out of Watchmen. I couldn't remember Watchmen all of a sudden. It was a realization I had about Watchmen where I said most literature that the world kind of likes is about the human condition. Watchmen is about the superhuman condition, which is why I think it will never have like broad acceptance among, I don't know, scholars, whatever. This has the same problem. For me, this is mostly about the superhuman condition, which I'm just not that interested in. Because this whole issue is about Cypher, or what's his name now? Revelation is named Revelation because it turns out he is the son of Apocalypse. And Apocalypse broke him down and rebuilt him in his image or something. I don't know. That's how he got these new powers. So this issue is all him dealing with psychologically being the son of Apocalypse with the help of Warlock and Bay, the Blood Moon. What was her name? Yeah, Bay the Blood Moon. And they're like off in some little cabin and like some group comes after them. But it was all his like psychological torment of dealing with being the son of Apocalypse. I was just like, how am I supposed to relate to that? I don't care that he's the son of Apocalypse. I don't care that he struggles with being the son of Apocalypse. So though it was I've got no criticisms of the craft of it. It was well done. But it was just, I just didn't care about the story because and that's just me. I don't care about the superhuman condition. I don't find it interesting. And like I said, not all superhero comics are about a lot of superhero comics are about the human condition. Not all of them. This one was about the superhuman condition and it just bored me. But I read it. I'm like, if it was really bad, I wouldn't have even made it through it. But I made it through it. So that must mean it's good to some extent. But I think that's why I don't like the X-Men very much. like when I was reading the X-Men, they were kind of adventurers. They weren't all angsty about being mutants. There was just a little sprinkling of that in there.
This was Scott Lobdell trope,
Yeah,
making the mutants all angsty.
yeah. I've never made it through a Scott Lobdell comic, so I wouldn't know. Not a fan of Scott Lobdell.
Scott Lobdell is a guy who lucked out into the greatest gig of all time.
Oh, I know. I was there. I got to see it happen. Because he was there. He used to be one of those writers who hung around the office with the editors, trying to ingratiate himself, trying to get
Right.
some work. That's what writers did in those days. And he'd pick up a story here and there. And it was just when Image Comics was formed and all those guys left.
Mm-hmm.
He was right there, willing to do anything Bob Harris wanted him to do. And that's what Bob Harris wanted. After all those guys who left, he was just like, I just want some. I got to see that happen in real time. And I was like, oh, okay. He's playing his cards right. But here's a question I have for you.
Mm-hmm.
This popped up in my head this week. SBPT, howdy kids, damn, I have a soft spot for Lobdell's Generation X. It was really well written. Okay, like I said, people like him. I just have never made it through a Scott Lobdell comic. It's not my cup of tea.
I've compared Scott Lobdell's X-Men run to a period in the World Wrestling Federation where all of the syndicated matches were with jobbers and all the good fights were on pay-per-view.
Ah.
And that's what happened. All the good stories were the summer crossovers, and then nothing happened for the next 9 months.
Here's the question that popped into my head this week that I'm not sure I have an answer to. Let's see. You're a high school literature teacher.
Mm-hmm.
What graphic novel / collected edition could you teach a class in? Now, it doesn't have to be like it'll be like teaching a novel, exactly like teaching a novel.
Right.
However long how long did they teach us novels for? A couple of weeks. It depended on how long the novel was. So I imagine you're only going to be teaching it for a week or two, depending. But there's got to be enough in there. And it's like, you have to, and you're teaching it as literature. Of course, there's the art angle too, but you're not sort of teaching it as comic books and their influence on pop culture.
Right.
You're teaching it just like you were taught any novels you were taught. I don't know what Portuguese novels were taught in high school, but here we taught, in the English novels were like Great Gatsby, Catcher in the Rye, maybe For Who the Bell Tolls, a little Hemingway, Sound and the Fury, Faulkner. I got taught, like teaching it just like and it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I really don't know.
It's tough.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want to go with Love and Rockets.
It's like, which Love and Rockets would you?
Right.
You'd have to pick.
And I don't want to go with a Corbin.
V for Vendetta might be. I didn't even think of that one, but that one might be something.
V for Vendetta is for politics class. For literature, yeah.
But like, I think I'd have a hard time like teaching Watchmen as literature because it's so superhuman condition.
Yeah.
You could teach that one in an art class, like to comic book fans, but I don't know if you could teach like Watchmen to high schoolers.
Yeah, you know that that literary critics hate genre fiction,
Right.
and comics are at their best when handling genre fiction because you can take advantage of all the tropes
Mm-hmm.
to use the art as a storytelling tool.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I'm not sure that literary critics would be able to come up with a list of interesting comics to teach in a high school
This isn't
class.
for literary critics. This is just for you. Could you teach the class? So don't even think about literary critics.
Okay, could I
Think
teach?
about if you could teach the class. Could you put together a class? The Crow might work too. I don't think I could put together a Crow class.
Maybe. I was thinking if I could do Grendel, but then because the
That's pretty big. That'd have to be like, because I thought the same thing with like what I think I could put together a class on, but it might be too big. Is hate. But it's such a big it's like that might have to be. I don't know if I could keep them interested in like high schoolers because I think that's too big to teach high schoolers. College class in Peter Bag's hate might be something, but I don't know about high schoolers.
Yeah, I'm not going to do Sin City because of all the sex and violence.
Exactly. That's another thing too. Like hate would have a problem in those early issues in high school because of the sex and violence or sex.
And Rocketeer does not have literary moments. It's pure adventure.
Maybe I don't know if you've read It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken by Seth. I think I might be able to teach a class on that one, and it might be short enough for the students.
I suppose Seth is one of those guys that I usually don't pick up, although I guess I'm too afraid to pick it up because as I've said before, it's easier to try out a superhero comic because I know what I'm going to get.
Yeah.
And risking on even if everybody around me is telling me you have to read this, you have to read this, you have to read this. Yeah, sounds interesting, but then new JSA.
Black Hole. I wonder if I could put a Charles Burns Black Hole class together. I think high schoolers would like it because it's kind of about high schoolers. But I don't know if I could put a class together on it. I think somebody could. I don't know if I could. What do we got here? Eric P says Hicksville. Goodbye, Chunky Rice, or The Waiting Place, or what I might teach in a high school lit class. Hicksville, I know. I don't know if the high schoolers would relate to it. Goodbye, Chunky Rice. Have I read that one or just thought about reading it? I don't remember what The Waiting Place is.
How about Scud the Disposable Assassin?
Could you get 2 weeks out of Scud the Disposable Assassin or one day?
Yeah, I guess I'd be done. I guess I'd be done in 2 classes.
Mouse is the obvious one. I don't know if high schoolers will like it. Berlin, that one might be interesting. Once again, I don't know if we can get high schoolers into it, but I think I could put a class together. Miracle Man.
Back to Superhuman Condition.
Yeah, once again, it's a book. You have to be a superhero fan to like Miracle Man. That's the problem when you're dealing with the general public. That one might be a little easier for them to find it exciting, but there might be too much blood and guts in it too for the school board.
If it wasn't for the costume, Longbow Hunters.
Eric P says The Waiting Place is about high school kids by Sean McKeever. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. But like Mouse to me is the obvious one, but I think that would be more college than high school.
Right.
I think there are classes in Mouse in college. But I think high school just has to be a little broader. Let's see. King City by Brandon Graham. I still haven't read that one. I do, because I like Brandon Graham's stuff, and I discovered him after King City, so I never got that one. And like I'm just looking over at my shelf here, like the Rick Geary true crime ones would be easy to teach in a true crime class, but but that's not a literature class. Like it's a tough. I found it a tough question. Let's see. Persepolis blankets, the tale of one bad rat, Brian. I remember the
Yeah,
tale of one bad rat.
I was thinking about the tale of one bad rat just right now, and I think it would work.
Yeah. Persepolis and blankets didn't really stick with me, but what's his other one there? The one he did Craig Thompson did just before his Ginseng Roots one that I have right back there. That's about the Middle East. I can't remember the name of it all of a sudden. But that one, I think you could get a class out. I don't know if and there's also, I think, I don't
Habibi.
There. I'm like, can I? Yeah. So, I'm like, maybe somebody can get a class out of it, but I don't know. Yeah, Habibi. There we go. That could probably Ronin. I don't.
Nope. I don't Ronin know. Is not an easy comic to follow if you're not familiar with Frank Miller trying to experiment with himself.
Yeah, I think there's so much context to Ronin about the comic industry that it would be tough to teach that as sort of a standalone class. Hello all, high school kids today love Innovation brand painted graphic novels for 89 to 93. There we go. Oh, and I have to ask Tit Goblin this question about a TV show I started watching, which takes place in St. John's, Newfoundland in 1986. That just came on Netflix. Son of Gitch or something like that. It's a story about a kid growing up in St. John's in 1986. He lives in a house with his grandfather, mother. It's a coming of age kind of comedy. But the episode I just watched was all about how cucumbers were coming to Newfoundland. The government made this big greenhouse where they're all going and everybody in the show acted like they didn't know what a cucumber was. And I was like, what? They didn't know what cucumbers were in St. John's in 1986? I found that hard to believe. Yeah, blankets may be too controversial. Yeah, my sixth grader students love Hellboy. You can of course get them to read comics, but especially sixth graders. But high schoolers, the teacher easier. Yeah. Mark Miller, Huck.
I'm not gonna do a class on Hellboy. Huh.
From Frank Miller, Man Without Fear and 300 are possible to teach. We teach on Odyssey. It's Young Sheldon, only not. Sprung greenhouses. Don't get me started on 90s cucumbers. That's what it was. Sprung greenhouse.
Yeah. We could do some European comics.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know enough European comics really to I probably know some, but
yeah,
have ones with nudity in them. The Incal, maybe. I mean, I'm not a fan of the Incal. I couldn't put a class together about it, but maybe somebody could.
Yeah, I want to avoid science fiction on this one.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing is, they would. There's a lot of nudity, so I'm not going to do the Passengers of the Wind, which is about the African slave trade. And there is a lot of nudity and violence. I just know parents are going to complain.
Yeah. I know I could put together a class in Seth's Clyde fans, but I'd lose the students on halfway through. I just know none of them are going to like Clyde fans, or one or two will.
We could pick out the best of Corto Maltese. So starting with The Ballad of the Salt Sea and going all the way to Fable of Venice.
Yeah.
I don't know it well enough, but could any of the Disney ducks make a class that high schoolers might like?
No.
No.
The problem is that it's all the stories are isolated. You're not
Yeah.
you're not following a character's progression.
Here, Eric P. Usagi Ujimbo. I would spin it as being about Japanese history myths. Then would see the problem with that is I mean you could certainly come up with a class. I could teach a class in that, no problem. Well, I think that would be more history. I'm thinking kind of literature, and it would just I think we just end up reading the Japanese history myths in that case. That's why I think coming up with an angle other than it's literature is easier, but it's not what I'm really thinking because in a literature class you don't have to come up with an angle. It's just literature. So I'm not saying no. I'm just saying that I think that's kind of outside the bounds of what I'm thinking of. Paulo Thomas says Paulo took all my fish, so I needed to harvest cucumbers. It was the 90s. Nothing made sense.
Hey, almost 100 years ago, we paid Mackenzie King for the right to take all of your fish back to Portugal. So take it up with him.
Mind the Goblin says nobody born after 1980 enjoys Corto Maltese.
Yeah, that's not it's not wrong.
Oh, I'm once again I'm looking over at my shelf. In Harvey Pekar, The Quitter, I think you could come up with a class on, but that would be like 3 days. They'd read it and then we'd talk about it for a day.
Harvey Pekar is very one note for me.
But that one's interesting. I don't know if you ever read The Quitter. What's interesting about that one is that it's about him in school and it's about his relationship with school. And it's about sort of him growing out of his relationship with school. So I think that would make it, but it would be a short one. That too short for what I'm thinking of.
I really don't like self-referential books because the problem with cartoonists who do autobiographies, their life is very boring.
Yeah. Let's see. Once in future and cover all the Arthurian lore. Once again, we may as well just cover the lore.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a bad idea, but that's not a bad idea for a class about Arthurian lore. But as a class about literature, I think it's different. Like so many comic book classes are about comic books in the context of pop culture sort of thing, rather than as literature.
Mm-hmm.
A Contract with God, that might be interesting. I haven't read that one. SBPT in Portugal, Preacher and Watchmen are on the list of recommended reading for high schoolers. Yeah.
Yeah, but nobody reads
them. Tit Goblin says, did you like Son of a Critch enough to keep watching it? Yeah, I'm going to keep watching it. I'm enjoying it. It's a fun little distraction of a show, a little half-hour comedy about a family growing up in 86 in St. John's. Yes, I agree with Harvey Pekar. Yeah. Like I said, I don't think it'll be a long class, that Harvey Pekar one, but I think I can get one out of that I would teach. Mine the comic says like a velvet glove cast in iron. I would teach that in Sweden.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting one. Now that you mention it, I think a lot of the Daniel Clowes stuff would have a solid chance of you can make a class out of. But that one you could really, because there's so much weird stuff in it. There's so much symbolism and pseudo symbolism and things going on that one, I think that one might be a good idea. Let's see, Camelot 3000.
Well, there we go again with the Arthurian lore.
Comic Crack says, comics as literature? Sorry, I must be on the wrong live stream. Don't
We will
worry, I've got some Richard Corbin coming up for you.
we will soon be talking about the proper way to draw chains again.
Liz, all Captain America today. In the Captain America, LOL. Did you hear about the Fantastic Four skywriting marking at National Blitz today? No, I did not. I actually saw it and didn't know what it was. Oh, I guess they're doing some, maybe a 4, was it, for the skywriting? Tit Goblin says, some of my art and family's knitting stuff will be in that new Netflix Josh Hartnett movie about giant squids or whatever foolishness it's about. It's off a graphic novel or something. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Eric P. Box office poison or I was just thinking box office poison. That one might be a little too comic book related. Have you read Box Office Poison?
You know, it's one of those books that I keep taking off the shelf at the store and putting it back.
I like Box Office Poison a lot. It's a favorite of mine.
Yeah. When I have money, I'm going to go after Box Office Poison if I can.
It's very much about being a young person living in Brooklyn in the 90s, which I spent a lot of time in Brooklyn in the 90s, so if I can relate to it. And it's about wanting to break in and do comics, which, of course, I can relate to, too. But I don't know if I might be a little too close to Box Office Poison and be able to make a class about it as literature and not about how I want to do it. So, but I think there could be something there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a tough question. You
know, I found the perfect Marvel storyline because it's not an obvious one.
What's that?
The 80s Strange Tales run of Doctor Strange by Peter B. Gillis.
I don't know that one.
Well, yeah, it's the one that nobody read.
Name drop Peter B. Gillis, so you must really like it.
Yeah, I do. But it actually has the literary themes. You have a person trying to do good and being taught by what do you call it? Well, he will have to make he's trying to do good, but he has to make choices that end up hurting people.
Okay.
And and until the end of the story, he has to deal with the loss of identity.
Mm-hmm.
And it is kind of cosmic, but it works. A few years ago, there was a collection of all those stories because Raintra has taken over from Clea as Doctor Strange's apprentice, and the Ancient One's best friend and oldest enemy.
Mm-hmm.
What was his name? No, I forgot the name.
Something or other.
I used to know the name. Yeah.
SPPT knows an art teacher that uses Akira in his classes.
Okay.
How about some Lemire stuff? I don't know. I haven't liked his stuff.
Too weird
enough to know. I could never teach a class in it. SPT says, from manga, I would love to share memories of Emamon with older students. I know that manga has a greater variety of things. So, like I said, what else could I? Because I think maybe It's a Good Life If I Can't Weaken would be my first choice, but I don't know. Like I said, I found it an interesting question, one I don't really have an answer to. But we'll think about that for future shows. If I had to pick a Marvel book, The New Mutants Demon Bear. Wendy Whiteblood Undercover Slut, says Comic Crack. I don't know what high school you went to, but that one wouldn't make it in mine. But because Comic Crack is here, I'm going to talk a little Richard Corbin and Murky World. Since I just finished reading this week, and I was trying to figure out if this is all new or where did it come from? Because in the back of it, we have, where is it? Original black and white Murky World story, serialized in Dork Horse Presents 2011, 1-3. And so I read this back part of it before. As a matter of fact, I have it in Dark Horse Presents, and I have Murky World #1, which I think they collected the stories in a single issue too. But this, I don't think I've read before. And it's very similar to this original Murky World story, but expanded on. So, yeah, I know it's not all new, but did the color Murky World appear anywhere before? No, but really, really interesting. A story about, I don't even know the characters' names. Here's our lead character right there. This guy with a long beard. Sometimes he's got a beard, sometimes he doesn't. And he's just, and it's funny because the story starts out, he's kind of old. He's going around. There's this woman here, the hag. Mag the Hag. She's sort of the narrator at times. And she's like, oh, you have to go over here. So he goes over. So there's this whole part of the story starts off with older version of this. What's his name? They said his Tugat, Tugat. And he goes through this little adventure, and then he something happens to him where he then wakes up as his younger self. And he's like, wow, that was a weird dream. And then he goes on and has these adventures as his younger self, and eventually gets to be his older self and relive that we once thought was a dream. So it's this big adventure story. And what's interesting about it too is he's not really a hero. He kind just you would think by the way that Corbin draws him that he's like this Conan the Barbarian type hero, but he's really not. He's really just kind of this average guy. But because everybody sees big, huge, buff Richard Corbin characters. So it's really the story of sort of an average guy in this setting. And just when even when he gets into fights, he kind of loses the fights. Like at one point, I kept expecting him to be Conan because I'm used to Conan and he looks sort of Conan-ish, but he doesn't really win so Corbin's always finding other ways for him to have other adventures other than winning the fight. I think he may have done a color version for his Fantagore press. Sorry, that was Mutant World on Fantagore. Okay. I think this is all new, most of this Murky World. But it also, I would have to say, after reading this for the first time ever, I got Corbin's art nailed in my head, kind of. Because one of the things, how would you describe Corbin's art? It's tough.
Yeah.
Cartoony, but realistic. All these words that really don't describe his art. And I think it's because of two things. It's because he obviously does a lot of plastic what's called plastic shading. And that's plastic in the old art term for it. Before we had this stuff we call plastic, and it's called plastic because it's moldable. That's why this stuff is called plastic, because we can make molds out of it. Plastic used to be a term that meant rounded or moldable. And so when you'd there we go. His characters are like plasticine. That once again we're to that word plastic. So that when you describe art as plastic, that means it looks three-dimensional. So the person who's doing the art is trying to make it look three-dimensional. So there's that word, plastic. Now we're going to go back to my old art history teacher, Irving Sandler, who said there were three types of realism. In painting, he's talking about. First type of realism is like the Renaissance, when you're trying to make something look like it exists in the real world. Tit Goblin, I've always described Corbin art as rounded, lumpy. Yeah, like I said, it's hard to describe as art because so the first realism is you're trying to make people think this exists in the world. That's what they're doing with their old-fashioned oil paintings. When someone says, wow, that looks real, that's what they mean. They mean that looks like it exists in our world. Or they mean it looks like a photograph. That's a whole other thing with our modern world. But the first type of realism is you're trying to make it look like it exists in the world. The second type of realism is, who was a French painter named Courbet? I can't remember what his first name was. Famous guy. But he said, show me an angel and I'll paint it. That was his type of realism. If it didn't exist in our world, it was never going to be realism. To him was painting things that existed in our world. And the third type of realism is a modernist realism, is an abstract expressionist realism, is a unsubjected painting realism. It's the realism of this is a canvas, it's flat, I'm putting paint on it, and I'm going to try to make this paint look as interesting as possible. I'm not doing an image. I'm not doing... this is paint and canvas, and I'm making a painting. That's the third type of realism. In most plastic realism that Corbin is doing is in service of that first type of realism. I'll compare like Corbin to what's his name? Boris Vallejo. You know Boris Vallejo's paintings?
Yep.
Boris Vallejo did, of course, his end stuff looks nothing like Corbin's, but Boris Vallejo is making everything round. When he does tits and ass, they're as round and real as possible. All of his rendering, all of his plastic rendering is in service to making that look as real as possible. He's that first type of realism. Corbin is actually that third type of realism. That whole, this is a flat canvas and I'm making a painting on it. Except he's not making a painting. He's making a comic book. And as we know, Corbin is a production guy. Mm-hmm. He was doing things with comic book production in the 70s that nobody else was doing. Because all of his rendering is in service of I'm making a printed comic book. And nobody else has done that like he has, which is why I think it's so hard to describe his art, because he's that third type of realism, but he uses techniques from that first type of realism in service of that third type. Almost everybody does that first type of that the plastic realism in service of the first two. He's doing it in service of that third one. He knows this is a comic book. He knows this is flat. He knows this is going to be printed on a printing press. So he's putting as much roundness in his art as he can. And he's using the printing press, the colors on the printing, which what you can now do in Photoshop, he was doing by hand. You can now push the colors up and down to create even more roundness on the page. So he's all of his roundness is in service to the flatness of the comic, if that makes sense to anybody but me. Let's see. Corbin to Goya, a distorted image that sums up reality, but he's summing up reality in a comic book. That's very important to him. That's the part that I think I wasn't getting until I really read. I've been reading of Corbin for a while. He very much knows that he's making a comic book. And that's why Corbin is much more interesting than Alex Ross. Could be. I mean, I don't disagree with you, but a lot of people like Alex Ross. And he's also a master storyteller too. I mean, that's just in sort of the way his art looks. His story, his graphic design storytelling. Once again, it's all about that 2D. This is a 2D comic that I'm moving your eye around, using roundness and using storytelling. But that came into my head as I was reading that Richard Corbin. How much Corbin stuff have you read?
Not much.
You know what? If I was to recommend the first thing someone reads by Corbin, you know what it would be? Bigfoot. That would be the first Corbin thing I would recommend people read. Even though I think it's out of print, you might not be able to get it, unfortunately. Maybe Dark Horse will reprint it eventually. But that would be I think that's A, so well done. B, if it was in print, it's sort of like it's a monster comic. So it's easy to digest. There's nothing, it's a straight up horror monster comic. So it's easy for your general reader to digest. Easier than this, which is not hard for, but that is the first one I would recommend, Bigfoot. I don't know, he didn't even write that one either. Steve Niles did, I think. But yeah, we got to get that one back into print for Richard Corbin fans. Yeah, Comic is a tough one to find. The couple of you have are really good, though. Yeah, I bought that one off the racks when it came out. Otherwise, you couldn't get it.
Yeah, have his adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe stories. And I have Cage, and I guess that's it.
Cage is good. Cage is really good, I have to say. Cage is what got me into Corbin after only reading him on and off for years. And I think one of the regions I think Corbin is more interesting than Alex Ross is just because I always call Alex Ross a one-trick pony. It's a hell of a trick. The trick that the rest of us wish we can pull off because we, bring home the bank like he did. But, sort of, once again, we're back to that first form of realism. He makes you believe superheroes can exist in our world. That's his type of realism. But kind of once if you're not interested in seeing superheroes that look like they exist in our world, Alex Ross is kind of, oh, okay. Let's see. Bloodstar and Arabian Nights are top tier, Corbin. I have Bloodstar. I don't know if I have Arabian Nights. There's not many comic artists that really break the traditional boundaries of style. Oh yeah. That brings me to another. I picked up this week. It was free. Marvel must-haves. And what they're doing with this is they're giving you there's 3 first issues in here. There's a Fantastic Four story, there's a Wolverine story, and there's a Storm story. They're all first issues where you can now go and get the trade paperbacks of them if you want more of the story. Fantastic Four Solve Everything, Wolverine Revenge, and Storm Volume 1, Earth's Mightiest Mutant. So it's got those 3. And that's how I would describe the art in this. There's not many artists able to really break the traditional boundaries of style. The art in all this was fine. The first one is Jonathan Hickman's the writer. Federico Vincentini and Iban Coelho. Another Coelho, Coello this time. Is that the same?
And this is in Spanish. It's pronounced Coelho. And you
Coelho?
Coelho.
Okay. And then the Wolverine is, who does this one? Jonathan Hickman and Greg Capullo, Tim Townsend on inks. And then the Storm one is, where is it? Writer is Mariwa Ayodele. I don't know that one. The artist is Lucas Wernick. And it's all perfectly fine art. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's all that highly illustrative. It's all that highly illustrative art. It's all perfectly fine, but I think none of these artists are able to break the traditional boundaries of style. That's what makes me, just a little bored by it. It's not really my thing, but I think that describes what I think about this. There's nothing wrong with the art. It's all just what is now, current traditional Marvel style, at least successfully. Alex Ross sometimes looks like cosplay. That's a good description. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's photo reference. But I would say the first story in this, the Fantastic Four story, is the best. If I were to read more of this stuff, I would want to read more of the Fantastic Four story. The basic story is Mole Man comes to the Fantastic Four looking for help because there's a city under the earth that the High Evolutionary made decades ago that's now going to rise up. And it's messing with Mole Man's kingdom too. But it was kind of a sort of straightforward Fantastic Four adventure story. And it was pretty, I said, if they're out of the 3, I would read that one more. And then there's, I don't know what... Days of Future Past has just wrecked everything. For those who don't know, Days of Future Past, the X-Men story from X-Men, 141 and 142 years ago, where they made like a future where they killed all the X-Men. That's where comic books first discovered that they could make an alternate future and get the drama of killing all their heroes without the drawbacks. So I have no idea if this is tied in with the regular Marvel Universe, this Wolverine story, but in it, some sort of giant asteroid or something has hit Earth, wiped out all of North America. Meanwhile, Nick Fury is around with the 3 remaining Helicarriers, and they go to pick up Wolverine in the Savage Land because Wolverine doesn't know anything about what's going on. And they're like, we have to go to Russia to steal this, I don't know, some kind of special nuclear reactor from them. Except it's guarded by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And it's like, okay, that's what, like I said, all of North America, it must be another continuity because all of North America is gone. And there's like few superheroes left. So then they, it's Wolverine, Captain America, and Winter Soldier. And who's Mastermind is the head of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And so they go in with the 3 helicarriers. They're going to send Strike Team down to steal this nuclear reactor. Meanwhile, somehow Mastermind blows up most of the helicarriers. So our 3 heroes get on the ground: Wolverine, Captain America, and Winter Soldier. And meanwhile, they get taken out by Deadpool, Sabretooth, and Omega Red in like 2 pages.
Yeah.
Just like that. They're like taken out. What? And then they put bombs in all their chests. And they're like, you think you can blackmail us to do anything? They're like, no, that's just to kill you. And they end up blowing them up. They kill Winter Soldier. They kill Captain America. They think they kill Wolverine. But guess what? Wolverine regenerates. And the story ends with Wolverine going, you're next, bub. He wants, The story ends with Wolverine regenerated and maniacal. But it's like, you guys thought a bomb in the chest would kill Wolverine? You don't know it's canon that he could regenerate from 1 blood cell or something like that? Because we were very aware of his healing factor. They had to use some special method to get a bomb in his chest. Like, but it must be an alternate world. And then the Storm one was just annoying. It was once again, it was about the superhuman condition. Storm had some moral decision to make where if she told the truth, it would make mutants look bad. But if she didn't tell the truth, she wasn't being true to herself. And it was just like, I don't care. I don't care that you ginned up this situation. And then since she told the truth, some cosmic entity came and took her to bring her to, I don't know, heaven or something. I don't know what the rest of the story is going to be. I am eternity, the beginning with no end, and I have found you, Aurora, you worthy Aurora Monroe, my eternal storm. I don't know what that is, but that one annoyed me. I read 5 Marvel comics this week because of those. Yeah. Let's see. SBPT asked, do you know the artist, how do we say that first name?
João
Lemos?
Lemos.
What was that?
João Lemos.
I'm not going to remember that in 2 minutes. I'm not going to remember it in 30 seconds. He did Avengers, fairy tales, and illustrations for the series Once Upon a Time. Check his latest Doom's Academy miniseries. Okay. Marvel at least does give you different at times. They do. Must say that about. I think they give you different more than DC does, but I'm not really sure. It's not like I buy a ton of that stuff. Let's see, what else did I get? Plague House wrapped up. This story turned strange. This was the one that was originally about a podcast crew who makes haunted house podcasts. But then, like I said, this is 4 out of 4. But then you find out that some of the houses really are haunted with ghosts. And the ghosts are haunting the lead guy on the podcast to go out and get their revenge on whatever made them ghosts. Like usually it was some guy in there, killed them or whatever. So he starts putting on a mask and killing people. Meanwhile, like the other two, they had like one guy was like a preacher on the podcast. He died in one of the haunted houses. Then he had his camera. I think she was the camera woman. She discovered the ghosts were real, and it has driven her mad. So she's in like this asylum now. But this all happened like in 4 issues. It's like really moving fast. So this fourth, at the end of the 3rd issue, he discussed with the crazy, his crazy woman. It's like they want us now to go to, what is it, White Sands? Is that the name of it? The Salton Sea. Have you ever heard of the Salton Sea?
Nope.
There's a movie by that name. I think it's in California, somewhere out in the desert, the western desert of the U.S. And it's like this desert area where there used to be towns in, but everything got all dried up and deserted.
Yeah, I think they used to have roadster races there. Illegal.
It's really flat and dry.
Yeah.
But anyway, it says here on lands stolen from the Cahulia Nation, industrialists built a playground that would ultimately poison the land. So I think that's what happened in the Salton Sea too, is that something environmental happened out there where they wrecked the place, whatever it is. So now the ghosts want him. He starts like killing public figures who are somehow involved with poisoning the sea and whatever. And he's just going mad. He's like, I can't keep this up. This is crazy. I can't just, because he like assassinates somebody who heads the company that and he's not the head of the company now, isn't even who, had anything to do with the Salton Sea, but the ghosts want him to. So this whole thing, I think he kills him. He's going absolutely crazy. There he is, doing what these ghosts want, to the point where he doesn't know if he's doing it because the ghosts want him to, or he's doing it because he's crazy and he's imagining the ghosts. So it becomes this whole psychedelic trip where he doesn't know. And this is the woman who's gone crazy, who's in the asylum. And he goes back on, and she's like, we are the house. It's us, our minds. So I think she's telling him that, no, it's us who are crazy. It's not the houses. So it's like this weird twist, and it ends up with him, of course, I can't even describe the ending. It's so, he of course ends up in jail, but so at the end, you don't know. I'm gonna have to read this one again just to see if you don't know what's real and what was these. Were there really ghosts, or was it just these two going crazy? What was I think there were ghosts. Did the ghosts drive them crazy? It's like, it was a really interesting end to this story. I liked it a lot. It was a more interesting end than if it had just wrapped up neatly, and because nothing wrapped up neatly in that end. You could probably teach a class on that one right there. It would be a short class, but a lot. That's another thing about trying to figure out what comic to teach, because so many comics, especially mainstream comics, are about the plot, so that there's not a lot of depth to them to teach. So it's kind of like finding something that's more than the plot. And something like Watchmen is an easy one because it's more than the plot, but it's about the superhuman condition. How many high school students are going to be interested in that? So that's going to be a tough one. Let's see. I think I had another. What else do I have? I wrote a few things down in my book this week. Oh, wrong side. Oh, here's something. that I just realized, something I heard Tim say, and I think this relates to you not reading Box Office Poison or whatever. You always go, oh, Justice League, Justice Society. Let's read that one. Did you watch Tim's video on his Batman continuity?
Yeah.
In there, he said something that's a common phrase. He didn't coin it or anything, but I realized I have never thought it in my life. It's when he said, I wish I could read Dark Knight Returns for the first time again. Like I've heard other people say that, it's not uncommon. Oh, I wish I could discover that all over. And I realized I've never had that thought. And I started thinking, why have I never had that thought? And I think it's because I'm one of those people who likes new comics. I like to find, and I was always that way with music, and I like to find new things. So it's like I'm always discovering, and I've learned most people aren't like that. Like you said, most people are like you. They want the J, they want what they know.
Although I want to avoid doing that. I recognize that it's a flaw that I didn't to get, because most comic book fans they don't, that we have around, they're not like that. They do want to remember what it's like being a kid. I can't afford to myself to just read the things that I read as a kid over and over again.
I think it might be related to me, but I don't think it's the same as wanting nostalgic stuff. Like, I think it's wanting to discover something over again for the first time means that something was special to you from the very beginning. And I don't think it's the same as saying, modern comics suck. I don't think it's that. I think it's when Dark Knight Returns hit, it was really big. It was sort of an event. It was different. It was by one of comics' top talents. It was on one of comics what used to be one of comics' top characters. People forget Batman wasn't exactly a top character when he did Dark Knight Returns. That's what made him a top character again. But there's so little of that if you're a mainstream comic fan. If you're a fan of superheroes, how often does a Dark Knight's Return come around? How often does something sort of that good and radical come around? Not that often.
Right. I guess I was pretty lucky because I was reading Claremont and Burns X-Men at the same time as I was reading Frank Miller's Daredevil.
Right.
And I was 6.
Me, I was reading them as they were coming out. There we go. I was probably 14. Perfect age for that stuff.
So there was a lot of good stuff. I had a formative period between the ages of 6 to 9 where there was a lot of good stuff coming out in Portuguese on top of each other.
Mm-hmm. When you're a mainstream sort of superhero reader, there's very, I guess there's more of it nowadays since they relaunch everything all the time, but some of it's just the same. There's very little thrill of discovery.
Right.
There's very little something really good hits you hard because there's a lot of sameness to it. So when it hits you hard, you're like, oh, I wish I could discover this all over again. But for someone like me who actively goes out there and discovers stuff all the time, now maybe it might not hit me as hard as like something really, really special. But I still get that thrill of discovery all the time. So I don't think I wish I could go back and read this again for the first time. I've never had that thought, which got me to thinking, how many first issues have I bought this year? Do you have a guess? Like this 6 months, January to July. How many first issues do you think I bought? Now there's two different numbers. There's balloons. First issues of something like Usagi Yojimbo, which is now in miniseries.
Yeah.
Really don't want to count that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're talking really new stuff that is not a continuation of something that you've read before.
And also not like Stefano Cardicelli, who I've been buying his book. So his first issue wouldn't count.
10?
That sounds like there were, this year, so far, I've bought 33 first issues.
Really?
It goes up to 50 if you count the Usagi Jimbos and stuff, but we don't count. 30, I bought 33 for, that's a little more than one a week. So it's like, I also didn't count like the ones I bought for, if it was like a Chris Russo or Scott Koblish cover.
Yeah.
Just ones I bought to read a first issue where I didn't know anything about it. I was like, I think that has a lot to do with why I don't have, I mean, that's I wouldn't have even guessed I bought 33 first issues so far this year.
Right.
That's a lot.
It is. You think that 10 is a good number.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to keep up.
Right.
But 33 and
first issues.
And at current prices, that's a 100. It's $130 investment.
Right. And it's like, like I said, I think that's why I never had that thought. I wish I could read this again for the first time, because I'm reading so much stuff for the first, like, as is my, but that is not most people's habit. But I found that number pretty amazing. Matter of fact, I had to whittle it down to 33. I mean, like the first pass I left out, and I think the number was like 40. I'm like, no, there's got to be more in there that I knew what I was getting. So I went back and looked again. I was like, no. So it's like I had to even like cut some out. Like I said, because I'm like I said, if I'm buying it because of the creator, at least I know what I'm getting. That's not a real first issue to me. That's, I'm buying Usagi Yojimbo because I always buy Usagi Yojimbo. Oh, there's Wilson.
Oh.
Hello there, Wilson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
What's up?
All right. Your mic's a little low.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that any better?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, great.
We were just discussing my habits and the phrase, I wish I could, read these issues again for the first time. And pretty common but I said, I've never had that thought. And I think because I buy so many first issues regularly, I discovered, and I actually, let's see if you can guess this number. How many first issues do you think I've bought this year from January to June? Not counting stuff like Usagi Yojimbo, or not counting stuff like Stefano Cardicelli's book series where I know what just first issues I bought just to try out, kind of blind. I didn't buy them because of the creative team, and like a Terry Moore first issue wouldn't count.
I would guess is that you get a first issue every time you go to the comic book shop to pick up your books. I think you average about 5 books a trip.
Mm-hmm.
2 or
Probably
3,
a little higher these days, but yeah.
Yeah, but there's at least 2 or 3 definitely always in your, like, waiting there for you.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're there, you will discover something. So I would say you probably do at least 4 to 5 books a month. And so you probably have more than 50 number 1 books in a year. I would guess.
In the first 6 months, it was 33.
Wow. Okay.
I wouldn't have even guessed the number was that high.
Yeah. And the only reason why I'm guessing it is because I do know from watching your videos is that there's almost always a number one.
Right, I'm always trying out something.
You're always
But, like,
trying out
that's what
something.
when I put it up to, like, the number ones, like Usagi Yojimbo, which I didn't count in the 30, the number goes up to 50.
Right.
Yeah, for a half year, that is, but yeah, it's like I was amazed that but once again, I think that's why I've never said to myself, "I wish I could read this again. I wish I could read Dark Knight again for the first time." Because I get sort of that thrill of discovery all the time. Sometimes
Right.
it's not a thrill of discovery, it's a clunk of discovery.
Yes. I would say you definitely will. I would even gather to guess you probably have more number one issues than you would maybe even have the second issue of a
Oh,
series.
yeah.
Where either it didn't continue or you decided on that number one, yeah, I'm not getting this anymore.
Oh, I also noticed I got a bunch of number one-shots.
Right.
Like,
Yes. You
completely
also do
blind,
that. Yes.
too, just, "Oh, give me this number one-shot."
Yeah. So I would
I
guess
don't
that.
think I can give up new things also. Yeah, but, like, not everybody, like, seeks out first issues like I did. That's why I think more people are like, "Oh, I wish I could read this again for the first time." There's really something special about that 85, 86, 87 era. Oh, yeah, there was some good stuff there.
Oh yeah.
American Flag, John Sable Freelance, Grimjack, First Comics First. Yeah, I have all that stuff. Collected all of those.
Yeah, those are things that, well, I was only some of them I was aware that they existed. Others I only found out after I started reading in English. But I knew that I wanted to read them for the first time, even though it had been decades since they came out originally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I could even say there was like a book just like, oh, I would love to read that again as if it was the first
Yeah.
time. Because for some of the books that I've read, it also included that particular decade, as mentioning 84,
Mhm.
85, 86, 87. So much was happening. Or I paid more attention to
Ah.
what was happening at those times to be able to go, okay, I'm reading the Marvel books and I read so many Marvel books, I'm going to try the DCs. And then I'm going to branch out a little bit and get New Wave because they're 50 cents a copy. And giving Archie a try because why not? And then all of a sudden you have Image, and then there's Malibu, and then all these things are kind of like happening for the first time in that decade. What do you mean these people said F Marvel and they're going to do their own thing? And
Mhm.
watching that happening, and there's something to say about reading the trade magazines of Wizard, Hero, that these things are happening, that these are being tested out, and then trying, hey, look, they put a hole in the middle of one of the comic books over at Malibu. That's interesting. And you know uh people are doing more creator owned stuff. So I would say at that time period, I was more willing to give number ones a
Yeah.
chance to try something new. Where now it's like I go into a comic book shop and I can easily go, I don't like the way I get too picky looking
Yeah.
at covers. And then it's like when I got home, it'll be like, I'll watch other people's reviews and go, I should have picked that one up. I probably would have liked it more if I picked it up. But, again, I think there was, for me at least, there was more excitement back then because I
Yeah.
was more involved into finding out what was going on.
And Eric P asked me, how many of them did you add to your poll? I don't know. I'd have to do it. I would guess around a third, maybe 12 out of the, because what it is so much of the stuff I buy are now miniseries and things that
It's
what
easy to
just
get a
came
new
out.
number one if
Yeah,
most of them are miniseries.
right. Like where one that oh, here's one I got this week, Godzilla Heist, issue number 5. And it says at the end, the end of this heist. So I don't
Ah, okay.
know. I imagine they're just going to start another Godzilla Heist series if they want to, and they're not going to make an issue 6. But
Right.
this one just ended. The one I just showed you, Plague House, just ended. Where'd that one go? This is issue 4. This one just ended. So, only 4 issues and 5 issues. So I have to constantly be looking for number ones. Another one, Grim 23. And at the end of this, it said, where is it? There's a to be continued. Oh, the end is nigh. Don't fear the Reaper. Grim. Final departure, October 2025. So I don't know if that's going to be the last story arc for Grimm. I don't know if it's going to be the last, because I guess they're taking a break until October, but there's going to be one final issue. It must be one final story arc, if that. But I'm not even sure it's going to end, because it just says final departure is the name of the story. The end is nigh. I don't know what that means. So, but
Right.
This one might be ending too. So most of my series end. So that's why I'm always on the lookout for new number ones. Mine the comic says, I find it's possible to start a story in a pretty original way with a new premise, but it's very hard to close it, not in a classic way. Yes. I think endings are the hardest thing of anything, which is kind of why I liked this weird ending on this Plague House. Damien says, I only want to read fillers or trades for the first time. Well, if you don't like individual issues,
Yeah, true.
That's the way it is. Here's another observation that Paulo just reminded me of that I had this week. When he just, how since I've been giving away comics to my students, these last couple of semesters, usually the question I ask myself is, am I ever going to read this again? And if the answer is no, I can give it away to them. And I realized that, can you guess what the question is that I can ask that I just realized this week? The question I can ask myself to figure out which are my favorite comics.
Did you already read them again?
Nope. The question is, do I want to read this right now?
Oh, okay.
And if the answer, even if I'm not going to read it right now, but if I want to read it right now, then it's one of my favorite comics. Like, I want to read Hate right now. I want to read what's his name? Rick Geary true crime comics. I want to read them right now. Every time I see like one of my Daniel Clowes comics on my shelf, I'm like, oh, I want to read that right now. So it's like, oh, you know what? I think that's a good way to tell what my favorites are, because I want to read them right now.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's a good way to measure it.
Yeah. Like all my old Marvels from my childhood, I love looking at the covers, but I don't want to read any of them right now. John Byrne, Chris Claremont, X-Men was one of my favorites from my childhood. It's not a favorite anymore because I don't want to read it right now.
I see that when it's like when people are doing reviews on YouTube and stuff like that, and they're talking about, there's always a top 10, because everyone has a top 10 type of thing, and they start showing artwork, and I look at it and goes, I could read that.
Yeah.
I could go back to, you say John Byrne, X-Men, it's like, Wolverine, coming out of the sewer and the Hellfire Club. I could go read that again. That kind of a thing.
I would want to look at that, but not necessarily. Like, I don't want to get rid of it, because I like to look at those old Marvels, but that's not the same as reading them.
True. Very true.
Like, what other stuff would I read right now? Habibi, I want to reread that right now. I want to read, I still haven't read all of Ginseng that Craig did. I want to read that right now. Mr. X, I want to read that right now. So it's like I was like that's an easy way to tell my favorites. I never thought of that before.
Yeah. I tend to want to read something right after like I talk about it. Today, I was talking to a buddy of mine. We were talking about Captain America and the movies and stuff like that, and saying, it always comes up. It's the 4th of July. That's when Steve Rogers in the comic books were born, on the 4th of July. That kind of a thing. And we were just having a conversation about it, and again, he mentioned he as he got older, he really enjoys the first movie
Mm-hmm.
because to him it really touched to him that Captain America was similar to that in the comic books.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I did enjoy that. And it's like, I would nitpick one part that I would have loved to have seen in the movies was the awakening of one of the sleepers, because that is just such a childhood memory for me for Captain America.
There were always sleepers, weren't
Because
they?
before I got into the comics, I remember the cartoons. And I also had a coloring book, an oversized coloring book that had one of the sleepers, one of the ones that like they were individual sleepers and then they connect to each other. And so, giant robot Nazi creature sleeper thing, I kind of want to see that, in the movies. And
And
again, it was like there was nothing wrong with the movies, but it was like that's such an ingrained thing because I saw that in the cartoons before the comics. And then again, as I said, I had the coloring book and I remember really enjoying that. And then reading the comics, the World War II stories have been some of my favorites with Captain America because of those flashback little stories.
if you were to ask me what Captain Americas do I want to read right now, I would pick Jack Kirby, Mad Bomb on into the past issue 200, and the Stern and Burn Captain America. So I guess those are my favorites.
Yeah.
Those are the ones of yours that, what one do you want to read right now? That's what I'd pick.
Right. I would go for most likely the John Byrne stuff and the Mike Zeck stuff. But it's like I could not tell you what issue numbers they are. I just know which trade paperbacks to
Okay.
grab, kind of a thing.
And then there's stuff like, and since you have favorites, you also have to have, just stuff like even stuff I'm buying today. If you asked me if I wanted to read Radiant Black or Rogue Sun over right now, I'd go, nah.
Oh, okay.
I enjoy reading them as they come out, but I don't need to reread them. There is stuff. I would right now reread Negation from CrossGen and Sojourn from CrossGen and Ruse from CrossGen. So those are three of my favorites from the early 2000s.
I could see revisiting the Valiant comic books one more time.
Now, you see, that's when you say revisiting, to
Yeah.
me, that's looking at.
I could, because for me, it's like I feel like I would take them out, try to figure out what kind of order I have them in, because I don't know where that collection starts. I'm pretty sure
Right.
I went back as quickly as I could to because again, once I discovered them and started reading them, they went up in price real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So I do recall going back to those issues, and I could see reading Exo Man of War, easily sitting down and reading that.
Okay.
I could read Exo Man of War today. Maybe not so much Harbinger, and maybe not so much the other ones, but the fact that they interconnected in such a way where it's like I don't know what it is that it was like Exo Man of War is I guess is my favorite because I'm ready to read that now, and I think I could put Magnus Robot Fighter in that as well, and then all the other ones since I have them out because they did interconnect and crossover.
Well, I think there's also something to be said for comics you want to look at. Like you at the beginning of the show, I brought out a whole bunch of because due to your and Paulo's conversation last week that I wasn't here for, I was trying to figure out which issues of the Hulk did I actually think were good. I was like, because Paulo said something like, "Oh, the mainstream superhero comics in Marvel in the '70s weren't that good, except Jared thinks the Hulk is good." And I was like, what do I think is good? I'm like, I never thought about it before because I always say it's my favorite from my childhood. But I'm like, which issues do I really think are good? So, like the first hour of the show, we were going over old issues of the Hulk, which I think is fun. I think,
Yeah.
even though I don't want to read these all right now, it was fun to go back and look at them and go over them. So I think that's a thing too. Like when you say I'd like to revisit Valiant, to me that was revisiting the Hulk. I didn't want to read them. I just wanted to visit with them.
Okay. Yeah, I
So
can see that
to me,
because
those are like two separate, two different enjoyable things.
yeah, I think another way that I would say I revisit stuff. It's like going through the big book of covers. I forget the
Oh
name
yeah,
of it, and I like sitting there and just looking at all the
yeah.
covers.
It's like a
You
time
know,
machine too.
yeah, completely. And it's like you're looking at them, and it's like, okay, do I remember that story? Can I figure out who this artist is just by looking at it? Not enough to make me get up and go and actually get it out of the collection,
Huh.
but to enjoy it looking at them all together.
Let's see some comments here. Ba-ba-ba. Eric P. I read Days of Future Past this week as I got X-Men by Chris Claremont, Prelude to a Future Past #1, which reprints 41 and 42. Yeah, those are two of the most influential comics I think in comic history. Like I said, they're the ones
Yeah.
who popularized the idea of creating an alternate future just so you can get the drama of killing your heroes without
Yeah.
it interrupting continuity. With all the political stuff that's happened this week, echoing the political stuff in those issues, it hit differently. Ooh, I think I'm going to have to reread those. You're right. Happy Hot Dog Day, Wilson. Remember to leave scraps of the bun out for Chris's reindeer for tomorrow's stale bread solar Saturday. Okay.
Yeah, on Facebook, I was like, I'm not really celebrating 4th of July. I'm celebrating Hot Dog Day.
Let's see, the last couple of comics I got this week, once again, almost ending. Bitter Root 4 of 5. They continue to fight monsters and racism in the early 60s. Like I said, only one more issue of that. So, like I said, issue 1 of Bitter Root didn't count because I already bought Bitter Root before, so I knew I was getting. Null Hunter, issue number 9. I think only one more issue of this. Also, so this one will be ending after. This is why I'm always trying those first issues because they end. And then the first issue I tried this week was Gehenna Naked Aggression by Patrick Kindlin, Maurizio Rosenwig. And it was okay. I barely remember it now. I think it was this woman. What was she doing? It was like mostly a big chase scene. Something to do with her being an assassin, but she didn't want to kill a kid. The art was all right. This is one I bought the first issue of, and probably not a second. But it wasn't terrible. It just wasn't my thing.
Right.
It was trying to be sort of an all-out action thing, which it was. But that's why I got to try out those first issues so much. Let me see if I have any... one thing... I meant to mention this last week, I think it was, but something I invented on Sleepy Reader's channel when he was doing a... he was mentioning there's somewhere on comic book YouTube, they give out awards every year for community awards for I don't know what, something to do with YouTube and comic book videos. And Sleepy said he got nominated again for something like the Hall of Fame in whatever and he's like, this is like the third time I've been nominated for it, but I'm not popular enough to ever get any votes for it, he said. And I said, I'm not popular enough to get in any Hall of Fame, but I'm for sure getting in the Hall of Persistence. And I'm like, that's what we need, a Hall of Persistence for people who just keep doing the show, even though, they're not famous. They're persistent. So that's what I'm for sure going to get in the Hall of Persistence. No problem.
So the only thing I have in my notes, and it was like I didn't get to investigate it at all, but a new term to the keys that I saw as a headline, but I didn't read it. But it gave me a chuckle with what was being called dead keys.
Dead keys?
Dead keys.
Dead keys. Like, so I have not heard that one yet.
I did not get to investigate what do they mean by dead keys.
I'm guessing that is the opposite of a forever key.
Mm-hmm.
A dead key is probably something that was once a red hot key issue and now nobody cares about. I would guess.
I would guess it's the first appearance of a character that was hot for a whole second.
Right.
Because of a rumor or something, and then people probably realize, yeah, I don't care if I own this.
A dead key.
And it goes back. But it was just, I had a chuckle with that, just reading the dead key. It is up there. So it's like, that was fascinating. But again, it's like, it popped up as one of the thumbnails on YouTube. I couldn't even tell you who had it, but it was like, okay, I need to look that up later to find out what are they categorizing as a dead key. But I thought that was enjoyable.
And I'll pose the question to you that we were talking about earlier in the show too, which we really don't have answers for. We're thinking about it. If you were to teach a collected edition or graphic novel in a high school literature class, and you have to teach it as literature. You're not teaching it as like, oh, this is how pop culture has influenced something. You're teaching it just like you'd teach Great Gatsby, Catcher in the Rye, something like that. What comic or graphic novel do you think you could make a class? And by class, I mean only as long as you're teaching, like, because when in English class, they taught us a bunch of novels. We'd go over a novel for a couple weeks, maybe. So you'd have to maybe get a week's worth of classes out of it. And it's tough. It's tough because, as I was saying, so many comics are about their plot.
Right.
And what comics are high schoolers going to be interested in? The school board will approve. So Richard Corbin's out.
Yeah, it's there's some of those. There's something to be said about why did they pick the books that they picked? Why were these picked?
Right.
I never read Lord of the Rings because I assumed it was going to eventually be assigned. So it's like, I'm going to have to do something on that anyway, so I won't read it now.
Oh no, they never taught that to us in class.
But the funny thing is like I was around enough kids who were reading it to think it was an assignment, just because of how long that was.
Right.
I didn't realize people were actually reading for fun at that time. Because it's like we did Gatsby, as you mentioned. That was definitely up there. Slaughterhouse-Five, quite a few Kurt Vonnegut books were up there. So it's like, it is hard to pick a comic.
Yeah.
And do, because it's like, yes, you could make a lot of classes just on, the breakdown of the different artists, art style.
You could teach that'd be a comic book class.
Yeah, you could definitely teach.
We're talking a literature class.
But
That's what's
just
hard.
a literature class.
Teach.
I guess it would have to be something that we already consider classics, like Mouse.
But once again, that to me, Mouse seems like the most obvious one.
Right. And that would be still hard to get through the curriculum
Yeah,
anyway because of the visuals. I remember being
and
in
I don't know how that Mouse seems to me to be a college class, not a high school one.
Right.
Because I think there are college classes on Mouse.
Right.
But I don't know if that'd be a high school class.
Yeah, because then what would be the next novel?
It's tough.
That is very tough. Yeah. And again, it's easier to do a comic book class because you can go as
comic book class.
You could grab any of the Fireside books.
And also,
classes
in a comic book class, all the students are going to be interested in comic books.
Yeah.
So that's an easy thing.
Right.
I think you have endless choices for a comic book class, but for a literature class,
right, that is hard.
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
And in a literature class, you'd be talking about what goes on in the pages. For a comic book class, you'd be talking about so much that's outside the pages. Like you said, who did this, who inked it, who did, what context it was made in. There's all sorts of questions in a comic book class that you can ask and answer. But for a literature class, it has to be all about what happens in that comic.
Yeah, I don't know which comic book it would be, but it would be written by Marv Wolfman. I don't know which one it would be, but it would have been written by him.
62 says, the Dead Key. I think it's about first appearance no one cares about and has no value. Yeah. I told you the answer already. Anything for Innovation Comics. Every 15-year-old in 2025 wants to read the collected works of Volume 1 of the Hero Alliance. Define literature. Words in book. This isn't a define literature question. Oh, come on. Define captain. What does your name mean, Captain? What is a captain? Define literature. Let's derail everything by making everyone define every word they use.
That depends on your definition of what the word is.
What about the...
Oh, you don't know.
Literature is the sum total of an ethnic group of an ethnic group's storytelling.
Eric P. Mouse would have been taught in my high school, likely in the Holocaust lit class. So once again, that in a specific Holocaust lit class, yes. We're talking just a general. Once again, a lot of comics will slot into other specifically historical stuff. Otherwise, it's 100% a college book. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that it was being taught at the University of Michigan at the end of the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a college book too.
You know, the Will Eisner books are probably good bets. You had mentioned a contract we got. I wanted to try The Building.
Okay.
Yeah, Will Eisner would be a good one for that. And again, it would be kind of like the older greats that would probably work.
It's tough. Well, we'll think about it. That's an open-ended question. We don't have to come up with the answer now because we're about to wrap up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we didn't even talk about Jim Shooter.
No.
Oh, you guys didn't get talked about? Okay.
We didn't even talk about. We were too busy talking about that. Next week we'll have to get to Jim Shooter.
Didn't come up.
Oh my! At last, someone found out how to turn Jared into Professor Hulk.
Professor Hulk.
As soon as you ask me to start defining words, I'm out. Like, get out of here! Get out of here! Define words. You don't know what words mean. How do we even speak to each other? Anyway, we'll see everybody next week on Paulo's channel.
Have a great weekend.
Hope you had a good time. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.